I can't see anything down here. Could I get some light on this, please? Ah, much better. Hello and welcome back to Hard On Gaming, where the games are hard and so am I. I'm your host, Big Stiffy, and this is yet another mod spotlight. Today's mod spotlight is going to be about a neat little mod that hasn't really gotten too much recognition, I don't think. This mod is called Cogs of the Machine, or simply Cogs. So what is this Cogs of the Machine mod about? Well, it involves a lot of cog wheels. The entire mod is basically all about mechanical power. There's no electricity, you just have mechanical things transferring power through cog wheels to other mechanical things. And it has a lot of pretty neat stuff. Much of which is probably already covered by a majority of other widely available and popular mods, but this one does it in its own unique way, and I think it's pretty cool. So the first things first. We have a wooden cog wheel. This is basically our starting point in the mod. And you start off with a wooden cog wheel and a wooden crank. And basically the first thing that you can build is a stone pounder. And it's not too difficult to build, it just requires a little bit of iron. But the mod doesn't change the way in which you obtain iron to begin with, so you can still progress normally through Minecraft up until you get to the point where you want to start having some fun tools. So you start yourself off with a pounder, some wooden cog wheels, and a wooden crank. And one thing to note, there are a variety of different cog wheels, each of which have their own max speed and, I guess, speed loss. And if I come over here, we can see that the speed loss does vary between the cog wheels. The base wooden cog wheel will lose 1 RPM, and its max speed is 40 RPM. So, how do we power the stone pounder? Well, first of all, what is the stone pounder? If you haven't figured it out, which I don't expect you to, the stone pounder is kind of like an ore smasher, basically. So you put ore into its input slot and it will smash ore. And you can actually see it has recipes in NEI, so you can see what it's going to produce of the stuff that you put into it. So that's pretty good. But how do we power it? Well, you can start off by putting a wooden cog wheel on the side. In fact, let's get rid of that one. You put a wooden cog wheel on the side of it, and not that. You turn it with a crank. And the crank itself will spin a cog at 40 RPM. If you shift right click instead of right click, it will turn the cog in the opposite direction. And it can also it can also break a cog faster. So if I go into survival mode here and put a cog down, it takes quite a while. Ooh, Jesus. Ooh. Alright, so that's not actually an intention of this mod. That's actually another mod that is doing that to me. So, yeah, it for some reason is detecting the wooden cogwheel as, like, actual wood. So, it gave me some damage. So, that's another mod that I'll cover at a later point. So, as we can see, the stone pounder has placed the ore underneath it, and it's getting ready to crank up and smash back down on it. So if I turn it again, and again, and again, there it goes. And what we get is some copper fragments. So that's pretty good. The copper fragments, you can get between, let's see, 1 and 3 ore fragments from any type of ore that you put underneath it. But that's not the only thing that the pounder will give you. So if you put a wood log in the pounder, it will produce 4 to 5 planks. If you put a plank in the pounder, it will produce 2 to 3 sticks. And if you put wool in it, it gives you 3 to 4 string. And cobblestone will give you 3 to 4 rocks. So I'm going to put myself back into creative. Oh, and as you can see, the wooden crank, it does take damage. So that thing will wear down eventually, which is why you want to progress through the mod and get things that you won't have to use a crank for. So yeah. If I put cobblestone in there, I just gotta spawn some in and demonstrate. So let's put a little bit of cobblestone. Let's give it a little bit of power. And there we go. It gives me rocks. Now the rocks are throwable. And they will actually do quite a bit of damage. They do 1 heart of damage, which, as you know, for every heart, it's actually 2 hit points. So it does 2 hit points maximum of damage at whatever you throw it at. And one more thing is that if you put a block of clay in the pounder, let's get rid of that, put that in, it won't give you clay balls, instead it will give you compressed clay, and this is pretty useful to progress. But first of all, it's kind of inefficient to continue to use the wooden crank to power your things. So one thing you can do is you can hook up your gears, kind of like a wire, but not quite, to a pendulum. Now the pendulum kind of stores energy that you give it. So it will turn a cog at 30 RPM at max power. If the system of cogs use up more than 10 strength, the pendulum consumes any stored energy until it eventually stops. So I turn this up and it begins to charge up. And it has stored up quite a bit of power internally to the point where I can no longer click on it with the crank. So now I can put stuff in it like more cobblestone, and it will continue to run for a little bit. And that's good like that. So the cogs, as you can see, you have to place them on a solid surface. But it doesn't always look the best to put them on the solid surface. So let's actually take that out of there. And let's get rid of the cogs. So maybe you don't have a solid surface to put them on. So what can you do in lieu of that? Because it kind of looks boring, to be honest. So you can actually put down some wooden rods. And you actually need to make a wooden rod in order to make your pendulum. So it is something that you'll have to make eventually. So you can oop, I missed. You can actually put the wooden cogs on the rods. And that looks a little bit better. It actually makes it look neat. So there you go. That's starting off. And what do you need the compressed clay for? Well, the compressed clay is what you're going to need to make a foundry. The compressed clay, you have to bake it, and it will produce claystone. Or you can actually just turn it into clay blobs. So the claystone is what you need to make a foundry, and you need about 5 of that. But that's something you can look up in NEI, because the recipes are there. And for the foundry, the stats that it gives me is it smelts ores faster, as well as makes alloys. So you can put some materials into the foundry to alloy them up. So if I type in cog, it brings up the list of items. So Cogs adds 3 ores. It adds copper, zinc, and tungsten. It does not, however, add tin. So that's one thing it doesn't add. Instead of tin, it adds zinc, compared to most other mods, which seem to always add copper and tin. So, in the foundry, you can cast either ingots or plates. And you can also put the copper fragments in, or any kind of ore fragment. Whatever you get in terms of fragments, however many you get, each fragment is worth 1 ingot. So the plates that you make take up half an ingot, and it holds up to 10 ingots worth of molten metal in the storage buffer. Now, it's got quite a few slots. These 2 are just whatever you want to cast the liquid metal into. You can choose ingot, plate, or none. And it will just hold the metal. So if I put copper in there, and I'm going to need some kind of fuel. So let's put this in here, because that will burn for quite a bit. So it melted up the copper fragment pretty quick. And what we want to do is we want to make some alloys. If we put 3 copper and 1 zinc into it, so let's give ourselves a couple more copper fragments. And let's give ourselves 1 zinc fragment. See, it can melt pretty quick. And it doesn't seem to really have any kind of heat value, as opposed to mods such as Tinker's Construct, where it actually has to heat up. So we got 2 brass. This will produce 2 brass ingots and nothing more. So in the process of combining the copper and the zinc, you lose 2 ingots. I'm not sure why, but that's how it is. Now another thing you can do is, if the foundry contains a zinc metal in it, you can take a iron ingot, I should say. I seem to have enabled caps locks. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Let's disable that. Melt it down again. You can take an iron ingot and place it in there, and we get galvanized iron. So this slot up here is the dip slot. It basically dips the iron ingot into whatever molten metal is there and produces galvanized. Now it only works with zinc, and I'm not sure there is actually any other functionality for that. And it uses up half the zinc ingot to make galvanized iron. So that is your alloy. And you're going to be needing quite a bit of galvanized iron to progress through the mod. So that's your basic starting point of the Cogs mod. And there is a lot of content to cover. So this is going to be kind of a lengthy mod spotlight. So if I go back and look up Cogs again, one of the things you might want to do is you might want to measure how much strength is in a system of cog wheels. So one of the things you can make for that, which you're going to need iron plates for and iron cog wheels, is a gyrometer. And this, if you right click a gear, you can see the speed and you can see the global strength balance. So this is running at 26 RPM and the strength is 0. And this can also measure the strength stored in the pendulum. So there is 1000 strength stored up in the pendulum. So if I put stuff like tungsten into there, it'll crush that, and has not used up anything in there, which is kind of strange. I would have expected it to, but I guess not. But in any case, once this starts using up power, the pendulum will eventually start losing strength. So that is probably amongst your first tool to make. And it is kind of optional if you want to make it or not. So one of the other things to go over, I should say, is that you have a variety of cog wheels. And as I showed earlier, each cog wheel has a different max speed and a different speed loss. The better the cog wheel, the better the speed and the less speed loss it has. So the golden cog wheel is the best amongst all of them. You can got iron, brass, and gold. So golden cog wheels will work at a maximum of 90 RPM. So that's pretty good. And you also got a couple others which I will cover later on. Some of your earliest tools are going to be a liquid drainer, a folding ruler, and a clockwork cane. And actually this is going to come quite a bit later. The folding ruler, not too difficult to make. You need iron rivets, which of course you need the foundry to make, so it isn't too bad actually. And just some sticks. The folding ruler isn't too useful really. It's basically just a measure. So it measures the distance between 2 points that you click on. Still kind of a useful tool if you're going to be doing a lot of building. Your other tool is the liquid drainer. Now there is quite a few advanced parts in that, so maybe I should cover that just a little bit later. amongst the first things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get into steam power. Now, this is kind of pseudo steam power, I would say, because it produces steam but then builds up pressure. So you're either running off steam or running off pressure. I'm not really sure which. But in any case, you have your steam pipes, you have your steam generator, and then you have your pressure tanks. The pressure tank supposedly holds steam, but identifies it as pressure. You have your steam generator, which you just put water into and put some kind of fuel source into. It'll show you how long it's going to burn for in this item here. In fact, let's demonstrate that. Let's steal some of the fuel out of this. Oop. And come back over here. And let's get ourselves some water. So, spawn in some water. And as we can see, fills up pretty quick. And that shows how long, I guess, how long it's going to burn for. I'm actually not sure what this GUI says. I don't know. But in any case, the pressure tank is starting to build pressure. Now, the unique thing about the steam pipes is that the steam pipes actually cannot intersect, or two steam pipes cannot cross each other. So you can actually use the crank, which silly me, I threw away. So let's spawn ourselves another crank. There we go. The crank will actually change the orientation of the pipe. So you cannot have this pipe intersecting these two pipes or whatever else, and they can only connect in a certain way. So the crank will change what they're connected to, but you never have to worry about them crisscrossing, which is pretty unique compared to a lot of mods. Now, the steam generator itself will produce the steam produced by the steam generator is 1 unit per tick. So for every 20 seconds, or for every 20 ticks, that's 1 second, it produces 20 units of steam. And over here you have a steam motor which produces mechanical energy from the pressure built up in the system. And the steam generator will produce 180 RPM per unit of steam. So let's just put some, let's actually steal the fuel out of here and steal the water out of there, because we don't need that. Put that in there. So now we'll start building up pressure, and this will start powering the steam motor. And it's got a nice GUI in here. We can see it's applying 0 RPM to anything connected, because there is nothing connected at the moment. So it's just building up pressure at the moment. Let's get ourselves some wooden cog wheels. So say we want to power the stone pounder. We need to put a cog wheel on this and just connect them up as so. And there we go. We have now sent power to our stone pounder. And it does seem to cause a little bit of lag with all the cog wheels moving. I'm not sure if that's actually because of the animation of the cog wheels, or if it's because they have special models. I'm not sure. But it does cause a little bit of lag for some reason, which I can understand. Because Minecraft is just full of lag. So you can power multiple things hooked up to a series of cogs. So if I want to power this stone pounder, can put that there. And say we want to power our winding bench. Put a cog wheel on that. And we just lead them over. And voila! Everything is now powered. So in a way, the cog wheels kind of work like wires from a majority of mods with like electricity. But either way, that's how you do that. But say that maybe you don't want to have both things powered at once. Well, luckily we have a thing for that. We have a golden switch cog wheel. Now you can actually make switch cog wheels out of various different things. but of course gold is always going to be the best. So I can put that cog wheel there and put this here. Voila, we have movement. But if I flip it, it stops the whole system. Now that might not be ideal. Now I think there is a way that I can rectify that, because this will respond to a redstone signal. So perhaps I want to use a detector signal. I can put a detector signal right here, and it will produce a redstone signal based on the cogwheels spinning. Now, I might be able to figure something out here, but this is a little bit spur of the moment. I didn't think to try this before. So if I can't connect that there, let's see. Actually, I think I can put a lever. Let's spawn one in. The lever should actually stop it. No? No, maybe not. Alright, I guess I lied about that. But you can in a way use cogs as a different type of redstone system. So they can actually replace redstone in a variety of ways, which is useful considering that the cog wheels will stick to any surface. So you can have them under a block, on the side of a block, on top. It doesn't matter. So you can use that as a impromptu redstone circuit, which is pretty useful in its own respect. So let's go back to cogs, and here we go. So one of the other things you're going to need is a servo table. Now the servo table is pretty advanced. It's pretty much going to be your starting point for making a lot of different things. And as you can see, it requires a lot of pretty advanced stuff. You need servo arms, brass rivets, and a mechanical board. And lots of this stuff it uses a lot of microcrafting, much in the same way that industrial craft would. So there is a bit of microcrafting, and there is a lot of things that are reused in other recipes, but that's fine. I actually quite enjoy the fact that it uses a bit of microcrafting rather than just using some vanilla items and saying, oh, it's magic. So it does try to make things a little bit logical, and I appreciate that. So the servo table is basically your advanced crafting table. So if you want to make some of the later game and end game items from cogs, you're going to need it, because they will not be, you cannot produce them without the servo table. And this can show you the recipes, so you can make your clockwork cane, a liquid drainer, a fan, mechanical saw, winding bench, clockwork pickaxe, portable saw, portable fan, pounding hammer, and rivet gun. So lots of fun stuff. And we're going to go over all of it. Unfortunately, I've been recording for about 23 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut the video here and pick this up in the next video. So keep an eye out for part 2 of my mod spotlight of the Cogs of the Machine mod. It's pretty fun stuff, and I think you're going to look forward to it. So join me next time. Take care, Internet. I will see you in space.